All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Industry Chat number 2 for interactive design. I'm super excited to introduce you all to Nick Miller, the real Nick Miller here with us tonight. Nick Miller is product designer and scuba instructor here in Nashville. Nick, welcome to Youngstown State University's interactive design class.
Hey man, thanks for having me. It's good to be here and excited to walk through just kind of some of my work, like what we do together. We've been working together for almost 4 years now. So yeah, happy to walk through some stuff. It's gonna be cool.
Awesome. Nick is one of the most talented UI designers, UX designers that I know. Absolutely. Don't shake your head. You're great. And so I'm excited for him to share a little bit about his backstory. We're going to talk about UI design, interactive design, how to get inspiration, kind of when you're in a lull, and this cool challenge that Nick has going on right now, building 100 UI interfaces in 100 days, which is really cool. So Nick, with that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory, your background, and kind of where you're at today?
Sure. Yeah, man, I've been doing this UX thing for a while now. I grew up here in Nashville and went to school at Tennessee, finished college in 2008, and then moved to Texas right after I graduated and kind of started my career there. But to kind of like go back to college, back in 2004, when I was at Tennessee, there really wasn't a program at the time to kind of do like digital media. I mean, they were kind of breaking ground, kind of combining like electronic media and some other like web news media and website type of things, but there really wasn't like kind of this traditional like UX discipline back then. So I went kind of this visual communications route where like I got to do like photojournalism. I did some news website design, like video production. It was kind of like a well-rounded multimedia type of degree. And then me and my like college roommate, he was a computer engineer. Like we would just stay up all night and like hack around with websites and like building blogs and right at the time like WordPress was coming out.
Yeah.
WordPress is still like very like prominent, CMS out there. And like we just had fun with that. It was just kind of like a side thing that we did, and we would just like build and break stuff. And like we ended up building like this college football blog that ended up blowing up one night, and we had like ESPN reaching out to us like, who are these kids like at Tennessee? Like we were just like messing around. And anyway, it was super cool. And I think at that time I kind of knew like, all right, like I'm gonna get this degree from Tennessee, but I really want to pursue like web design and kind of make a career out of it, because I knew we had something there, and I was like, there's got to be something. So when I finished school, I, like anybody, just tried to start working as fast as I can to start, paying bills and stuff. And I got a job out at Arrington, doing like the wine thing, and I was just freelancing. And a buddy of mine, he got an offer to move to Texas, and so I was like, hey, yeah, I don't have a job, but I'll move down there and kind of see what I can do. And luckily, I landed a job and worked at a law firm and just started building things. Like this guy hired me to do some work, and he had a bunch of websites, and I really got my foot in the door just kind of building a bunch of WordPress stuff and doing design work. And then I kind of transitioned into more of a formal role at an agency where I started kind of learning, managing clients and how to do just design work when you're working from a brief, and a lot of the stuff that I didn't really get experience in college because I didn't do like the traditional design route. And yeah, I worked there for a while and got great experience in big companies like Motorola. Amazon was one of our clients. Like it was really cool to just early on to like get thrown into just this agency environment where you're really just moving quickly. And I know you have an agency background as well.
Yeah.
So, I would say like looking back, that was a very valuable piece of my career, because it really helped me kind of focus in on the details and then like client needs. And worked there for a while. Then I kind of transitioned into a role at a travel place where started working in native iOS and Android, building a travel app. And then I most recently, 4 years ago, got relocated from Dallas back here to Nashville, which is home to work with you in healthcare. And today I work on HCA's patient portal, which is an iOS and Android app that we just launched this year. So it was about 3 years in the making. And and that's what I work on every day. And there's been a couple other products that I've gotten to just work on and collaborate on. Yeah, it's been super cool. I've enjoyed working on. We got to work on My Health One a lot, and that's something that I think, looking back now, it's like a product that I'm super proud of, and
Yeah.
it's one of those that just keeps growing every day. It's been awesome to see. So
Yeah. I think one of the things I've always appreciated about you is you've stayed, I mean, ever since I've known you, you've been one of the more curious designers I've known, to always want to experiment and try out new things and take inspiration from, although you work in healthcare, from your experiences, work, building a sports product, working in the wine industry, working in entertainment, and building from your travel experiences, and how all those different things, no matter what genre you find yourself designing in, you can find inspiration and build off of those experiences you have, or where you're looking for experiences from, and pour those into whatever product you're currently working on. I think that's one of the great things about design, is always being able to be curious and find inspiration from different areas. So I guess my question for you is, where, maybe talk a little bit about the importance of finding inspiration for UI design, for UX design, and maybe kind of how you go about doing some of that.
yeah, that's a tough one too, because I think sometimes, I think there's kind of this idea that every designer is like working on something sexy or working on something really cool, but like when it's all said and done, not every UX designer works for Airbnb or Uber or Facebook. Like, there's a lot of really complex financial systems, logistics systems, healthcare systems that have a lot of complex data and things that just aren't necessarily like seen by the end user or consumer.
Yeah.
And that's some of the most important UX in the world. And so when you get locked into that world, it's sometimes it's tough to like be inspired by things. So like what I typically do is I like looking at just think like products in the real world. So like the famous example of like the IKEA experience, like
Mm-hmm.
what a brilliant way to like experience their store by making everybody walk through the entire room setups until you get to the very end where you can finally buy like the products. Like, to me, that's brilliant. And
Yeah.
the other example I like to bring up is just like elevators. It's something that we just don't even think of now, because elevators are just another part of our daily lives. But back in the day, when elevators first came out, it was a conscious product decision to have like an elevator operator, because people were scared, and then they started kind of transitioning the elevator experience to have not an operator. And then people were freaked out, like, hey, there's usually an operator. Like, well, I can't do this on my own. And, they started introducing things like music and a phone, so that if, the elevator breaks down, you can call. So like when you get on an elevator, you don't really think about that every day, but those are like real world problems that a designer had to solve for. And like, I always like to think of those types of situations, especially when you're designing something that's new or people are unfamiliar with it, because there's always ways to create delight. And I know we've talked about that in the past, but like, the whole elevator experience, listening to happy music, that was definitely an element of delight that helps eliminate people's fears. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I love trying to solve like real world problems, not because the digital world is obviously growing and changing quickly, but it's always cool to just go see like what other physical designers have done.
Yeah, I think maybe two things to piggyback off that. A, I hate heights. And so I would have definitely benefited from having somebody in the elevator with me. But to your point, I just had this conversation earlier that UI designers, UX designers, I think you could probably span that out as graphic designers as a whole, are problem solvers, I think, by nature. We want to find the solution that's going to be the next best thing, or find a solution that's going to make our end users' life easier. So I think naturally we're problem solvers at our core. And I think to your point about the elevator, that's not a UI, that's not a user interface, right? But it is user experience. It is the user of that elevator and their experience, and what brings joy or comfort to them during that time. One thing I think I've always heard you talk about was designing for delight, or delighting the user. Maybe expand upon that a little bit if you can. What that means to you. I think there's some ways you've described it, but you're probably going to describe it a little bit better than I will for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about working, in UX and UI. You get to see and experience things that you're not really thinking of when you're solving problems. And I think, to give you kind of a recent example, we launched My Health One in June of last year. And of course, we did all this work to like really make the app better. We wanted to make it not only just look really good, but like, help people log in, create accounts really easily, get access to their health records super easy. And so my father-in-law he had just had knee replacement surgery over at TriStar Centennial. And of course, the first thing I told him, I was like, now that you're at the hospital, you can download My Health One and use it. And just curious of your feedback. And like, I was thinking personally, like, he's going to be like happy about how easy it was to log in and download, and it's going to look so cool. No, like his feedback was, man, it was really cool seeing the message from my doctor in there. And that was it. He didn't say anything else. And I was like, I was blown away, because a lot of the research I did in my grad school program was around how like just inherently social we are as human beings. And why do we buy certain clothes? Why do we buy certain cars? Why do we do the things that we do? A lot of it is because we're very social in nature. We wouldn't buy the shoes if we didn't care people were looking at them, right? And so the fact that like My Health One, which is not a social app, my father-in-law found that one little tiny social like component of the app, and that was what delighted him. And to me, like, that was so fascinating, because I was like, I'd never even thought that somebody would drill in that deep into the product and find that little bit of happiness. But to me, that was super cool. And so like, when you're working on super big complex problems and stuff like that, you don't really think about those little tiny things. But yeah, it's definitely a win when you hear those types of things.
Yeah, there's a concept in UI and UX called micro interactions, and it's those little moments that just, maybe go unnoticed by the user, but it's something that you as a designer pour a whole lot of time and energy on to make sure that the experience is just over the top. And I think, we'll talk about ways in the next couple of projects with this class about defining a persona. And Sydney Marsh, who's a great, you and I both know Sydney is a great user experience researcher, does a lot with personas. She's going to talk to us in our next industry chat about designing and understanding the persona, or the individual that is your main audience, your main user, and how you can create an experience for them, designing for delight that is just that little over the top moment that they're not expecting. And that it just sells your product to them and makes them want to come back and reuse it and share the word about the thing you're working on. And no matter what industry you find yourself in, to your point, Nick, of whether it's healthcare or, products for travel, or, very back end data driven, analytical products, you can find those moments of delight that just make that experience that much more over the top or that much more seamless for the user.
Yeah, and it's not even to just like, sometimes I think we get lost into creating something that we'll like ourselves, but like, there's a lot of times I'm like, man, I wouldn't do it that way, but I know my wife would like it done that way. And so sometimes just kind of thinking outside of the box, like, looking at like some of these design challenges, like my wife will walk by and she'll be like, hey, like, it would be like, if I were to use that, like I would do this. I'm like, whoa, never even thought of that. Like, my wife uses products way differently than I use them. Like, I use Spotify and I listen to the music I want to listen to. Well, she listens to Pandora because she just wants to listen to the radio. Like, that's two different, use cases. And to me, like, it's important to like make sure that you're not creating something for yourself, but solving for the end user.
Yeah, that's why I love UX. That's why I love what we do. I mean, you're always challenging yourself because you're probably not the end user of your product, and so
Right.
you have to really, dive into solving those problems by putting yourself in the user's shoes, and that comes through empathetic design. It comes through user research. It comes through persona building. It comes through all those great things in UI UX design that really challenge you to think differently about your work. I know you mentioned the 100-day challenge, and that's one of the things. I know you're going to share your screen here with that. But one of the things I've enjoyed kind of watching you on socials, and go ahead and plug yourself during this, but where folks can follow all your scuba journeys and your UI challenges. But one of the things I think that's really cool is, as a creative, whether that's in college or that's in your professional life, thinking outside of the box and challenging yourself and always being a learner from a design perspective. So maybe talk a little bit about this UI challenge that you're doing right now. And I'd love for you to share some of your work if you want to,
Yeah, sure.
showcase maybe some of the things you're excited about and a little bit about this challenge.
Yeah. So I promise you this is not sponsored by Daily UI. Like, I don't even think that's really a company. I think it's just like a website some designers kind of spun up and created this challenge anyway. So I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so the daily UI is something that's pretty cool. It was definitely like a 2021 New Year's resolution where I wanted to do something that I felt like would make me grow and and learn as a designer. Because I think, like you mentioned, it's important to kind of consider yourself a student for life, because if you're not always growing and learning, then you could get left behind, or you could get kind of locked into a certain mentality and not be able to like think outside of the box. And so dailyui.co is a really cool website where all you do is you plug in your email address, and then they email you a prompt every single day for 100 days straight. I think that they actually don't do it on Saturdays and Sundays, but so it's just Monday through Friday. But when I started the challenge, I was like, I'm just going to do it 100 days straight, not take the weekends off, because I just want to get through it and just crush through it. So the challenges I don't have, I usually just kind of look them up on Dribble. But typically they're a really quick brief. Like I'll give you an example of a brief that or a prompt that you'll get in your email. So one of the examples here, daily UI number 13, design a direct messaging app. And they're pretty quick when they like give you the prompt, and they don't really give you many details. It's just like design a messaging app. It could be messages, images, placement, how are they used? Is it for support? So you can kind of take it in any direction that you want. And going back to the whole like problem solving thing, if you go on Dribble and look through the UI that people have posted, obviously you're going to see like super elegant, like really nice looking screens. Everybody's, using really cool colors and fonts, things that like pop. Yeah. But, when you look at like your iMessage app on your phone, like you wouldn't necessarily look at that app and go, man, the app is so pretty, So yeah. To me, like Dribble is great if you need like inspiration and you want ideas around like colors and fonts, but they're not really going out there and solving problems. So like just an example, the first thing I did, I think I typed in like daily UI 13, and then I went on to Dribble and I found like this really nice example that this guy has done. Yeah. And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, man, this is super, super cool. Like the colors, like everything's looks super modern and elegant. But then you start looking at it in detail, and you're like, man, like what problems has he solved here? Like, you've got kind of the side navigation, you've got your message kind of summary here, you've got the detail of the message, and then like this profile section. I'm like, has he really done anything kind of outside of the box? And so that's where like, kind of talking to like bringing in like your personal experience and like the physical products. So I, like you mentioned, I teach scuba on the weekends. And when I saw the messaging prompt, I was thinking, well, what's something in my life that I have, like I struggle with from a messaging perspective? And I was like, it's perfect example is when you're underwater, like you can't talk, right? I mean, you can have like a really expensive intercom system if you're like on the Discovery Channel, but like just me, like I'm just, I just use a regular like regulator, and you can't talk underwater. So I was like, how cool would it be to design something that would help people talk underwater? So like for my daily UI 13, the idea that I came up with was a messaging app for like your Apple Watch. So we all know like your Apple Watch is waterproof, but it's not like scuba proof. So you can't necessarily like dive deep with it. But who knows, in the future, it may be underwater rated to like 30 meters, who knows? And today's recreational scuba, the way you talk underwater is through a series of like different hand signals. And so the idea around this prompt was like, it'd be cool maybe to come up with maybe 6 different like quick actions that a diver could look at. One maybe being around your air or your lungs, the second one being around creatures, the third being around maybe like an alert, 4th equipment, 5 like map or location, and then 6 like the boat location. And then if a user taps that, they would get like kind of pre-selected, like responses that they could select, and it would send it to their dive buddy. Yeah. To me, like that was like, it's not the most elegant UI, right? Like this is something that already exists. I didn't do anything different with fonts or colors. All I did was I tried to solve a problem that's out there today that there's no solution for. And so awesome. To me, like that's like the way I kind of think about work and the stuff that we do every day is I try to think about it not making something pretty. I try to think about it from like more of a problem solving technique. Yeah. So I'll walk you through kind of another prompt. So here's another one, pop-up overlay. And this is one that, we see pop-up overlays like all the time, but like, what is something I can do to kind of take this to the next level? So I came up with this idea of doing like this 360 underwater pop-up that maybe like if you're like using an application and they're wanting to get you to sign up to become certified as a scuba diver.
Hmm.
Like what a better way to like allow the user to like navigate like 360 content of a diver and then be like, wow, that looks really cool. Like I want to do that. And
Yeah.
so this isn't something that you're really going to see very often. Like 360 video is still kind of like a newer technology. So
Yeah.
that was the second example. I have a third one here.
Yeah.
So design a drop down. We all see drop downs, right? Like
Yeah.
if you go through Dribble, like designers just kind of come up with this really pretty elegant like drop down. And I was like, well, how can I solve a problem with a drop down? So I took a look at Mill Creek, which is a local brewery here in Nashville. I took a look at their website, and their website's like it's cool. Like I really like their branding. I actually know the guy that did the branding. He's super nice.
Cool.
They have like a pretty cool website, but I was like, they have some challenges when it comes to their navigation. If you click beer, there's like a drop down and it says our beers, find a beer. It's like, there's like all these clicks involved. And I was like, what's a way I could kind of solve a problem for them? So I came up with this solution where similar to like the Apple website, like you could kind of hover over beers and then it would drop down and kind of show you what they have as their core product.
Yeah.
And then you could kind of scroll to the right and see their seasonal product. And that way, like not only is it visual, but like it's less clicks. It's a little more elegant and, kind of gets the user right into the product without having to do too much work.
Yeah.
A couple other kind of quick wins here is I designed and styled the buttons kind of around their logo. So you can see there's the stroke effects that they have around their logo in the shield. And I kind of carried that through into the button design. And then just kind of focused on like a nice CTA here and the nice hero image. So, I mean, obviously not like rocket science or anything that's super, super crazy. But, again, one of those ways that like you're kind of thinking outside of healthcare, thinking outside of your day to day and trying to solve a problem for someone based off the prompt.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I love that example because, I think most folks would anticipate that to be a drop down, just kind of a normal navigation drop down. But I think that speaks to the idea of designing for delight. Like, I mean, they wouldn't expect that. And so to be able to hover over that or click on it and have that visual kind of fly down. I think that's awesome. And then you tying in the buttons to the logo. That's why I say you're one of the best in the game. I think it's great. I think you do a great job. And it's those little things like that of how can you tie in the entirety of the experience? Because to your point, it's not rocket science, but it is just creating that overall cohesive, unified vibe, pulling from the logo, pulling from, inspiration, designing for delight, and just creating experiences that wow. And I think that UI design challenge is so cool because even, for students, for professionals, that's something anybody can do. And I think about next generation of UI UX designers, those types of challenges, things like that. Those are great portfolio builders. I know you're just doing it on the side, doing it for fun, keeping your skills sharpened along the way. I think those are things, though, from a student's perspective, those are huge portfolio builders to be able to showcase your work, to always be growing and things like that.
I think the other important thing too is to not think like, I think some of the stronger pieces that I've created so far were pieces that I didn't necessarily spend a ton of time on. Like the Apple Watch example, that probably took me like 30 minutes or so to put together. I mean, it was just a couple circles and icons, right? Whereas there's some very intricate, UI challenges that I've done that took me several hours, and maybe the work wasn't as strong because, when I was finished with it, I was like, I think it's okay, but it wasn't really solving the problem that I had really gone out to solve for. So I think the important thing to think about is like, don't necessarily spend a ton of time, kind of spinning your wheels. Some of the best ideas are done in just a quick sketch or a quick whiteboarding session or a quick brainstorming session, and not to tie up too much time. Like that guy that I showed you an example of, he spent probably a ton of time designing that really elegant solution of the messaging. But when it was all said and done, like what problem was that really solving?
No problem solved. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that. One of the other things we want to talk about maybe with you do a great job, I think, also from an interactive design perspective, and creating prototypes and things like that. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience there. One of the things we're going to be moving into with this project in particular is taking a variety of different screens. We're building out a apartment complex website and actually creating creating prototypes based off that. Our next project after that is actually building an app. So I know you've got a lot of great experience in the application world, but maybe just talk a little bit about interactive design and building prototypes and things like that.
Yeah, so perfect example is kind of what I just showed you with that pop-up overlay, right?
Yeah.
Pop-up overlays are those annoying things that, sometimes they ask you to subscribe, sometimes they're telling you to allow cookies or whatever they're, trying to accomplish. And one of the ways I like to kind of spruce up my designs and prototypes is I like to add that level of interactivity. And so to do that, a lot of times what I'll do is uh, I'll use my phone just to try to create kind of this either screen recording or like I'll try to create this interaction, and then I'll kind of pull that into a prototyping tool. So today, like I'm using, it's like a combination of Photoshop, Principle, and InVision.
Mm-hmm.
But just like that scuba example where I showed you kind of me scrolling through in a 360 view. So I actually didn't like do a ton of work to mock that up. I shot the 360 footage on my phone and then uploaded it. But all I did was I screen recorded me opening the video file and then just swiping through it. And then I uploaded that screen recording to my computer and then just threw it in the comp. So it really wasn't, it didn't require, it looks like a lot of work, but it really was just a lot of screen recording and then using kind of a combination of tools to stitch it all together. So I think that's just one way to kind of help like bring your designs and your prototypes to life, is to show kind of the rich interactions. Like if you log in using Face ID, there's this really nice little animation that kind of shows it's read your face and it'll log you into an app. Well, it would take several hours to like create that from scratch. And one of the cool things you can do is you can simulate that by just take a screen recording of you logging in on a Face ID app, and then just pull that bit of content into your prototype. And we do that all the time. Like if there's something that you see on your phone, like maybe it's something cool on Instagram, or if it's something cool on Facebook, like, whoa, wow, that's kind of neat. I haven't seen anything like that. Take a screen recording of it and save it. Mark it in your favorites. Throw it into a prototype. Play around with it. See if there's different elements that you can tell, like the designer and the developer were playing around with. Because to me, like, we kind of live in these different worlds of, paper prototypes, wireframes, and then kind of the higher fidelity, rich prototypes and interactions and things like that. And then obviously getting apps and data and stuff. It's like, to me, like, I think we're going to start moving and seeing things kind of in the rich fidelity stage more so now, because there's just so many tools kind of at our fingertips that you can use every day. I can tell you, mocking up an application like 5-10 years ago would take forever. It would take weeks and weeks. And we didn't have tools like Sketch and InVision. We had a lot of stuff was done in Photoshop. A lot of the redlining, splicing of assets, timeline animation. A lot of that was done in Photoshop. You can do all that on your iPad now. Like there's tons of really talented motion designers that don't even use a computer. They just do everything on their iPad. So to me, like, it's super exciting to kind of see this next wave of students and creators kind of creating things based off of tools and devices that are traditionally haven't been used in the past.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And thinking outside of the box. I like the way you described it: low fidelity, high fidelity, rich fidelity. It's like that next level of engagement and experience. So much of that helps a development partner or even from a marketing team sell the product. Designers play such a critical role in not just building the product, but then how do you market it and sell it too? I think we've had a great conversation, Nick. I know we were talking a little bit about design systems, wanted to jump into that. We'll save that for another day. And I think this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your perspective on UI design, on UX design. Anything else top of mind for you before we close it out?
No, like I said, I'm excited to kind of, be able to provide kind of a perspective in the history of kind of what I do and what I've done. And like I said, I'm excited to see kind of the way things go with this new generation of creators and designers, and look forward to see just how people are solving problems in the future. Even outside of like what we've talked about today, UI and UX, I know that there's tons of new things kind of coming down the pipeline with voice and AI, and I'm super excited to kind of see what's coming. So
Yeah, possibilities are going to be endless. And that's, I think, so exciting about this field. Like, even from coming from a graphic design background, those kind of foundational things you learn are going to morph and shift and change throughout your career. And you just pour those experiences on top of each other, and always be curious, always be a student, always be excited about the next thing that you could do, the next problem you can solve. And so it's super cool. So hopefully this has been helpful for everybody in the class. We wanted to focus tonight on UI design, interaction, inspiration, for user interface design. Nick, where can people follow you for your 100-day UI challenge?
yeah, just my Instagram. It's Nick D Miller _. It's a lot of scuba stuff. So yeah, feel free to give me a follow. I'm posting once a week with all the designs that I do. And so yeah, the other thing I wanted to throw in there is to make sure you have fun. Like,
Yeah.
I know we have a lot of fun working together, and we have for the past 4 years, but I think, when you're not having fun doing design work and solving problems, like, I feel like your work's not going to be at its best. So make sure to do whatever you have to do to make sure you're having fun, when you're thinking through a lot of this stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Nick. Our next session is going to be around personas. So industry chat number 3, Sydney Marsh is going to join us. She's a UX researcher who dives into building personas and generating user research and interviews. And so it'll be really helpful for as we move into project number 3 and 4. So looking forward to that in a few weeks. Nick, thank you again. For everybody else, I'm looking forward to seeing what y'all submit for your wireframes. Hope you all have a great weekend. All right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks. Good luck.